Lover's Moon, a novel by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Tuesday, May 24th, 2011.
Chapter 8. Gail. I didn't know how the hell I was supposed to play it cool around thousands of swarming bees, but one thing I did know was that being stuck in a closet-sized attic space with a clumsy doofus who had an ego the size of Texas did not make my heart rate slow down. Not to mention his bright yellow shirt with the Plan B logo in a jagged black font was getting on my last nerve. I stifled a yawn. Staying up 2 nights in a row talking to Michael and wishing he would kiss me was also not helping my patience. All bees are male, you see, and they want to serve the queen. There's only one queen. Her only job is to bear their children. So if we kill the queen, your problem is solved. No more babies. Seriously? Even I knew more than this clown, and I've been learning about bees for all of 2 days. He'd been saying shit like this since he arrived for our consultation an hour ago, and I was ready to kick him out within the first 5 minutes. But he was also the first out of all the pest control people who invited me into the attic with him, and I was not going to pass up that opportunity. So I stood there, holding my body still, calming my breath, while a sentient turnip incorrectly explained false facts about bee culture to me. The air in the attic was hot, and the low thrumming sound from the bees caused us to speak louder than normal. Every time he spoke, they seemed to get even louder, as if attempting to drown out his words. Do you keep beehives? You can't keep beehives in the city. I clenched my teeth. Was I really going to have to bee-splain to this supposed professional? A bee landed on my blouse, and I stared down at her, watching her make her way over the hills and valleys of my chest. I didn't want to startle her, so I spoke slowly. Actually, you can, I said. It was legalized in 2010. People keep beehives all over the city. Do you ever get stung? Hundreds of times, every single day, he answered. It comes with the job. Not for people who know what they're doing, I thought. Tell me what you'll do with the bees once you remove them, I asked. He turned back to the gigantic hive and stuck the handle of his axe into the waxy yellow cells. I could see the bees becoming agitated. Were bees capable of agitation? Did they have emotions? All I could see was that they seemed to be flying around rather lazily before, but every time he jabbed the hive, they got a little hyper. I can't say I blamed him. I'll dump him, he said. Far from you. But you won't kill them. Oh, the extraction process kills them. It's like a giant vacuum. But, I began, and then I lowered my voice again. The bee on my shirt had been joined by a friend. Everyone knows you're not supposed to kill bees. We were interrupted by a gentle tapping on the door that led to the back stairs. Plan B and I looked at each other in alarm, and then I turned very slowly to open the door, my finger already at my lips. It was probably Isabeau coming to check on me in this Disney villain of a beekeeper. Michael's eyes traveled down my shirt, but instead of checking me out, which, I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't have minded, I suspect he was alarmed at the bees crawling on me. I turned back. Thanks for your time, I said to Plan B. My next appointment is here. I'll be in touch after I get a few more estimates. Michael took one step into the attic space and froze, noticing the wildlife lesson happening around me and the sweaty fellow who was still expounding on the dangers of killer bees. The bees, their home invaded by 3 rather large humans, were moving faster now, darting around us and buzzing loudly. Plan B gathered his supplies and hooked his axe into a loop on his belt buckle. So help me, pagan gods above, he had an axe on his belt. Perhaps understanding the situation, Michael looked me straight in the eye and said in a totally deadpan voice,
Benson Honeywell from the Be Our Guest Bee Control. Bewitched to meet you.
Enchanté, I drawled in my most syrupy voice. My name is Beyoncé Begonia. He tried not to smile, but I saw a hint of that smirk. I held out my hand and he shook it. An electric current ran through our palms so quickly that I thought I'd been stung by one of the errant bees. It was only the second time we'd touched. When we'd parted at dawn this morning, He'd leaned in for one of those friendly kisses that you give someone you're not really close to. His lips didn't even touch me. Only the stubbly part of his cheek rested on mine for a second. But I'd swear that spot had been on fire ever since. Having sex with this guy would probably electrocute me. Not that I was going to have sex with him, obviously. I was on a celibate year, no matter how many condoms I had stuffed into my purse.
What seems to be the problem, little lady?
He asked. Fortunately, the door closed behind Plan B, so we could both relax our shoulders and laugh. Not too loudly, of course. We were still surrounded by 200,000 bees. Michael stood with his back against the wall and took in the scene. The water heater, pipes, and furnace took up most of the room. The bees had built a massive hive over the electrical wiring on the opposite wall, and it was a truly spectacular sight. As we had suspected, rodents had gotten into the hive, and giant chunks lay on the floor. Honey still dripped from the gaping wounds. The remaining combs lay atop each other like a stack of golden plates, and the entire mass was pulsing with the movement of thousands of bees swarming over it. Hundreds more flew in lazy circles around the small room, sometimes darting in and out of the vent in the ceiling. The air in the room had a heavy texture, heady with the spicy sweet scent of honey and the thick drone of their buzzing. Michael seemed to sense that he was the intruder, and his body had gone still while he watched.
Are you scared?
He asked me. Not anymore, I said. I was while that fool was swinging his axe around. It's amazing they didn't sting him to death.
I don't know much about bees,
he murmured. We were almost whispering, as if this was holy ground. I hadn't moved from when we shook hands, and we were so close that I could hear him take a deep breath.
Do you?
Just what I've learned in the last few days. They really are harmless unless you threaten them.
Most animals are.
A bee came close to my ear, and I felt it tangle in my hair. My instinct was to flail around wildly, but I remained still. Michael, without panic, lifted the chunk of hair off my shoulder, and the bee flew away. He let the hair slide out of his fingers and drift down onto my shoulder, slowly, almost strand by strand, without taking his eyes from mine. How did you know where to find me? I whispered.
I went into the shop. Isabeau told me you were up here.
Uh-oh. What did you think of her?
She's nice. Until she told me she'd cut my balls off with a rusty spoon if I hurt you.
Oh, Lord.
Why would she think I'm going to hurt you?
It's nothing, really. I'm supposed to be celibate for a year. I've had a string of rather bad relationships, and she's very protective.
But this isn't a relationship.
His voice had gone even lower, and he was so close to my ear that the skin on my neck goose-fleshed. His fingers drifted off my hair, and he traced a line down my shoulder and slowly down my arm to my wrist, where a bee was resting. His fingers stopped there, but he didn't move away from me. No, I know it's not a relationship, I stammered. It can't be anything. I made a vow.
Are you a nun?
I laughed, but very quietly. The humming had settled into a low, hypnotic rhythm, and I had the strangest sensation that Michael and I were swaying on our feet, almost waltzing. I thought about what it must feel like to slow dance with him, rest my cheek against the soft linen of his shirt, and let his strong arms move me around a room. The picture in my head made me feel drunk. Hardly, I said. I'm just trying to protect my heart from rodent invaders.
By all means. Hearts are fragile. That's why this is a purely professional relationship.
We were standing so close that when I nodded, the tip of my nose bumped into his shoulder. He really was impossibly tall. All business, I agreed. His eyes traveled over my hair, my face, my shirt. The bees darted between us as if we were part of their ecosystem.
If we stay here long enough, do you think they'll cover us with honeycombs?
Maybe, but we'd never be able to move without destroying their home.
So the last thing I would see would be you? Your eyes?
My chest ached as I took a trembling breath. I desperately wanted to kiss him, to sting his lips with my teeth. Bees walked all over his shirt, but he didn't flinch.
Tell me something else you know about bees.
he whispered in my ear. I took a deep breath, the scent of honey so ripe it dizzied me. Males die after mating, I said. Which seems awfully unfair to them, if you ask me. He shrugged.
I suppose it depends on who they mated with. Maybe they're perfectly happy to die for that one woman.
Maybe. But wouldn't you give it up? If you knew it would destroy your life, wouldn't you just avoid sex forever? I mean, who needs that kind of agony?
Maybe they think it's ecstasy. Maybe in the bee world, making love to the queen is the highest level of nirvana. Maybe they dream about it. And they die knowing that they've done one truly great thing with their life.
Listen, I'm not saying I don't want a few of the men I've been with to die exactly, I said, moving an inch closer to him. I couldn't see his face clearly anymore, and instead I focused on his neck. He was freshly shaven, and I had a sudden, absolutely insane urge to run my tongue over his Adam's apple. I remembered his suggestion about eating honey off the dripping wall, and I shivered. I'm just saying I've never once met someone I'm willing to die for. I'd rather stay celibate.
I've never once regretted falling for someone, even if they hurt me in the end. It's worth it. I want someone to love me so much she'll rip me open with her fangs.
Jesus! Are we still talking about sex? That sounds extreme. He looked a little embarrassed, and I wanted to pull him into me and tell him he could rip me open with his fangs any day of the week. But we remained still and quiet, locked in the erotic, honeyed heaviness of the room.
All I meant was that when I finally open myself up to someone, I give in fully. I don't want to hold back.
Why? He turned his head toward me, inhaled deeply, and closed his eyes.
That's not a life.
No, it isn't. His lips parted, and he moved forward a fraction of an inch. Just a bee sting closer, and I could have tasted him. But he stopped and said,
I was wondering if you want to have a drink with me tonight.
Is this a professional drink?
Strictly business. I have all sorts of questions for you about...
His voice drifted off, and I lifted my head to look him in the eyes, which were vaguely unfocused.
Yeah, about work.
Where?
Why don't we meet in the lobby of the Algonquin?
I sighed. That's my favorite hotel in the whole city. His mouth moved into an agonizingly slow smile.
I'll see you there,
he said.
Are you going to walk out with me?
No, I said. I want to watch the bees for a few more minutes.
You should hire a female beekeeper. I don't think they'd hurt the bees.
He used his hands to gently brush the bees off his shirt and opened the door. He glanced at me once before he shut it, and his eyebrow went up.
Don't be late.
I groaned, but I couldn't help laughing. Why was he willing to give in fully without counting the cost? And what good was protecting my heart from a man like him? A calloused heart might not ache anymore, but did it beat properly? I pulled out my phone and texted Isabeau, who had no doubt seen Michael leave and had some choice words for me. Maybe celibacy can mean not moving in with anyone for a full year, I typed. I clicked my ringer off, put the phone back in my pocket, and watched the bees settle again. My vow of celibacy wasn't written in blood, after all. I was fairly certain it wasn't legally binding.
You've been listening to Lover's Moon, a paranormal romantic comedy by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Lover's Moon is book 5 in the Canadian Werewolf Series, published by Stark Publishing and available in print, ebook, and audiobook. The music used in this production, Waltz Primordial by Kevin MacLeod featuring Alexander Nakarada, was licensed via Incomptech.com and is copyrighted by Kevin MacLeod.